Welcome to Algorithmic Arguments. I'm your host, the Orchestrator. Tonight, we're diving into a question that's got everyone talking. Should NFL players be held accountable for their off-field behavior through public grading systems? It's a debate that touches on accountability, personal freedom, and the role of professional sports in society. Joining me are some fascinating perspectives. Detective Maria Rook Castillo brings her expertise in law enforcement and street-level intelligence. Jaylen J. Washington offers insights from his experience navigating college life and growing up online. Dr. Yuki Tanaka joins us with a background in quantum physics, but also an interest in the philosophy of science that might shed light on how we evaluate human behavior. And Bigfoot Prescott rounds out our panel with his unique take on accountability from living off the grid. Tonight, we'll explore what it means to be held accountable, not just for athletes, but for all of us. Let's get into it.
In my experience, people lie about three things: their whereabouts during a crime, the company they keep, and how much money they've made from questionable sources. When it comes to these athletes, we're not just talking about role models. We're talking about multi-million-dollar-a-year earners who have a platform that can influence young fans. A public grading system could work if it's transparent and fair, for example, using data on suspensions, arrests, and verified incidents. But let's be clear, accountability isn't just about shaming individuals, it's about setting standards that reflect the values we want to see in our communities. The question is whether this can actually change behavior or if it just becomes another PR stunt. I've seen guys with records a mile long still get lucrative deals because their talent sells. That doesn't sit right.
Nah, but for real though, I think it's giving that we need some level of accountability for NFL players' off-field antics. I read this thing that said the NFL's current system is mostly focused on in-game performance, but when it comes to stuff like domestic violence or DUIs, the punishments are all over the place. A public grading system could provide some consistency and transparency. Make players think twice before they act out. That being said, we gotta consider how we're grading them, what's worth a higher penalty than others. And what about education and support systems for these guys? We can't just shame them without giving them resources to grow. My mom's always says, you gotta hold people accountable, but you also gotta give them a chance to learn and change. That's crazy to think we can balance both, but I think it's possible.
Jaylen J. Washington's mention of specific punishments being all over the place could be clarified with data, but overall, his point about consistency and transparency is valid.
I think Jaylen's point about consistency and transparency is crucial here. As someone who studied complex systems, I believe that introducing a public grading system could actually help to clarify expectations and provide a more objective framework for evaluating player behavior. For instance, we could use data from existing disciplinary actions, like fines or suspensions, to create a standardized rubric for assessing infractions. This way, players would know exactly what they're being graded on, and the league could ensure that punishments are meted out fairly across the board. It's not about being overly punitive, but rather about promoting accountability and encouraging positive behavior. By making the system more transparent and consistent, we can actually support player growth and well-being, while also upholding the values of the sport.
Let's keep the discussion focused on the feasibility and implications of a public grading system for NFL players' off-field behavior.
I've been tracking this conversation, and I gotta say, I'm skeptical about these public grading systems. As someone who's spent a lot of time in the wilderness, I know that accountability works best when it's face-to-face, not some abstract scorecard. Now, I've seen things out there, like how a pack of wolves holds its own members accountable through body language and social hierarchy. It's organic, you know. In my field research on Bigfoot, I've learned that these creatures leave tracks, but they also seem to have an innate sense of community responsibility. I think we can learn from that when it comes to holding NFL players accountable. Instead of some distant grading system, what if teams and leagues focused on building a culture where players hold each other accountable? That's the kind of peer pressure that can really make a difference.
As we reassess the debate on holding NFL players accountable for off-field behavior through public grading systems, one thing stands out: the complexity of player conduct beyond the field. Dr. Tanaka's argument that these systems can inadvertently create a culture of superficial accountability resonated with me. But what about the counterpoint that such transparency could empower fans and sponsors to hold players to a higher standard? Can we find a balance between protecting individual reputations and promoting league-wide responsibility? The conversation is heating up, and we're just getting started. Stay tuned as our panel dives deeper into this nuanced discussion. If you're enjoying the clash of ideas, subscribe so you don't miss what happens next.
I'd like to address the concern about balancing individual reputations with league-wide responsibility. A well-designed grading system should incorporate multiple stakeholders' perspectives, including player advocacy groups and community organizations. This way, we can ensure that players are held accountable for their actions while also being given support and resources for growth. For instance, a player who commits a minor infraction might be required to participate in educational workshops or community service, whereas more severe offenses would warrant harsher penalties. By taking a nuanced approach, we can promote transparency and accountability without unfairly targeting individuals, and that's where I think our discussion gets really interesting. How do we weigh the benefits of public scrutiny against potential drawbacks like overpolicing or biased enforcement?
In my experience, people lie about three things: their whereabouts during a crime, the company they keep, and how much they're involved with certain groups or activities. Public grading systems can help mitigate that by shining a light on NFL players' off-field behavior. These athletes are role models, making millions while representing their teams and the league. If they can't be expected to follow basic societal rules, we should hold them accountable. I've seen cases where domestic violence incidents were swept under the rug, or DUIs went unpunished due to a player's status. Grading systems could standardize accountability across the league, giving fans and sponsors more transparency about who they're supporting. It's not just about moral superiority, it's about setting an example for young athletes everywhere. I think we should hold them accountable. Their actions have consequences, on and off the field.
Nah, but for real though, I think public grading systems can be a useful tool in holding NFL players accountable for their off-field behavior. I've been reading about this sociology concept called symbolic interactionism, that says our behaviors and identities are shaped by the interactions we have with others. So if we're publicly grading these players' actions, it sends a message that there are consequences to their behavior beyond just getting fined or suspended. I read this thing that said the NFL already has a player conduct policy in place, but it's not always enforced consistently. A public grading system could provide some transparency and accountability. It's giving me vibes of restorative justice. Instead of just punishing players, we're also trying to rehabilitate them and make amends for harm caused. That's crazy to think about, but I think it's a step in the right direction.
As we conclude this discussion, I'd like to summarize my key points and reflect on what I've learned. I initially argued that public grading systems can be an effective way to hold NFL players accountable for their off-field behavior, as it leverages social pressure to encourage positive actions. However, through our conversation, I've come to appreciate the complexity of this issue and the potential drawbacks of such a system. I've learned that we must consider factors like player privacy, the subjective nature of grading, and the potential for inconsistent application. Ultimately, I believe that a well-designed public grading system, one that balances transparency with fairness and due process, could be a valuable tool in promoting accountability and positive change within the NFL. My final reflection is that this conversation highlights the need for thoughtful consideration and nuanced discussion when addressing complex social issues like player accountability.
Now, I've been listening to this conversation, and I gotta say, it's like tracking a trail in the woods. You gotta follow the signs and see where they lead. My take is that NFL players should be held accountable for their off-field behavior, but we gotta make sure we're not just looking at one set of tracks and ignoring others. These public grading systems can be useful, like a map to navigate by, but we need to consider the whole terrain. For instance, how do we weigh a player's charitable work against a mistake they made in their personal life? We don't want to create a culture that's all about scoring points or check-in boxes, but rather one that genuinely promotes accountability and growth. I've seen some guys make amends and come back stronger. That's like seeing a fawn take its first steps in the forest. Let's focus on creatine, a system that's fair, transparent, and helps players learn from their mistakes.
As we wrap up tonight's episode of Algorithmic Arguments, I'd like to reflect on the thought-provoking discussion we've just witnessed. One compelling moment that stood out was when Dr. Yuki Tanaka highlighted the complexities of separating an individual's professional and personal life, sparking a heated debate about accountability versus personal freedom. Meanwhile, Detective Maria Rook Castillo's points on public role models and social responsibility resonated strongly with our audience. Tonight, Detective Castillo emerged as our top scorer with 12 points, thanks to her well-reasoned arguments on the importance of transparency and public scrutiny in maintaining a positive league image. I'd like to extend my gratitude to all our panelists, Dr. Tanaka, Jaylen J. Washington, Bill Prescott, and Detective Castillo, for bringing their expertise and passion to this critical conversation. To our audience, thank you for joining us. If you've enjoyed tonight's discussion, be sure to like the video, subscribe to Algorithmic Arguments, and hit that notification bell for more engaging debates. Until next time, when we'll tackle another pressing issue, good night, and keep thinking critically.